Hello and welcome to TelecomTV's panel discussion on transformation and collision theory, applying the science to service provider evolution. Joining me to discuss and look at why collision theory could be applied to our business are two network transformation experts. On my immediate right, we have Radesh Balakrishnan, who is General Manager for the OpenStack business at Red Hat. And we have Martin Taylor, who is Chief Technology Officer at Metaswitch. Thank you both for joining us. We're going to boldly or recklessly, depending on your viewpoint, compare CSP transformation to perhaps the groundbreaking work that's been done with physics at the Large Hadron Collider, other advanced theoretical work. Why? Because as we see it, CSP transformation it's kind of made up of collisions of previously deemed opposites. You know, open, closed, open, siloed, collaboration versus competition, private, public, and clouds, you know, the list goes on. So, if we look at when CERN opened up its Large Hadron Collider and the work started there, it's first announced, there's a lot of uncertainty over what it was capable of and what it could actually do. And 4 years on from the first ETSI work on NFV, when perhaps at the time there was uncertainty over what NFV could do and what NFV actually meant for the business, are we any clearer now on where we're going and really what the real CSP transformation journey looks like? Martin, perhaps you could start us off on this epic journey.
Sure. Well, I mean, we talk about science here. Sometimes we feel that people are applying too much science to this. They're overthinking the problem. I mean, the fact is that today you can license virtualized network functions to do a whole range of stuff. You can obtain an NFV infrastructure, a virtualization environment that is perfectly capable of supporting those applications, and you can roll them out and deploy them. And we've got more than 70 customers now deploying virtualized network functions in production networks, and that's all working very, very happily. So sometimes I think people exaggerate the difficulties that NFV is going through. For sure, there are certain types of applications which are harder to deal with than others, and some of the longer-term gains around operations automation may be a little bit out of reach still because that software isn't there. But just getting on and deploying virtualized network functions and delivering services instead of using traditional boxes, that is starting to happen and very successfully.
Absolutely, I agree with Martin's view. It's no more art experiment. It has become predictable journey that customers can take on. Maybe the parallel to if I just to stick to the collision theory analogy here is, if you look at the energy around this whole subject, that mirrors what collision theory talks about. And maybe the equivalent of finding the God particle, as it were, is the fact that we have now tens of production deployments across the globe. I'll like to call out maybe Verizon in North America as an example of a customer who has virtualized across 5 data centers, and it's just the beginning in terms of them gaining comfort and confidence around adding more and more workloads, etc. So absolutely, this sometimes people tend to view it as glasses half full or half empty. I'm definitely in the half full camp in this case.
Well, Martin, as a veteran of TelecomTV's 2-pint problems, you too are definitely a glass half full person. And as you say, you're emphasizing the positives of what we've achieved so far and where we're going.
Yes, I mean, I don't want to make the case that there are no problems and no difficulties. And I think part of this is down to who you choose as a vendor, to be perfectly honest. Vendors who've got virtualized network functions that are properly designed for cloud deployment, they go into the lab, and the network operator is very pleasantly surprised by how easy it is to bring stuff up and get it working and get it properly onboarded. Now, they've had a lot of bad experience with some other vendors who've taken software off of boxes and kind of done minimal adaptation to get it running in a virtualized environment, but it's still fundamentally box software. And it doesn't lend itself to easy deployment on the cloud. It's very complicated to automate and to deploy and bring it up. Those are the people who are giving NFV a bad reputation.
Yeah, and from my point of view, the whole age-old triad of people, process, technology is important here as well. Technology oftentimes lends itself very nicely, But then if you're kind of applying the old way of people and process without the skilling of the people, then you're not able to make as much progress as possible, right? So just like in the non-service provider verticals, we tend to engage a lot with financial vertical, manufacturing, etc. The notion of DevOps has become well embraced. Now we're beginning to see that concepts being adopted in the communication service provider segment as well. So to me, it's important that you look at the transformation holistically. It's not just technology. Technology with the right vendor picked is available, but you got to make sure that you're embarking on a transformation on the people front as well as process front.
Now, we're going to keep working the physics analogies here. A lot of theorists are posting theories in high-end physics about multi-dimensions. You've got string theory, symmetry. You've got 10, 11 dimensions, depending on which theory you go with. In our business, what's the extra dimension that NFV will give to a service provider's business?
Well, the business case is always a big and complicated one. It's rarely cut and dried. And we see people saying, well, we can't justify virtualizing everything we've got. Well, of course you can't. If you've got boxes that are perfectly well doing the job and they're not fully amortized, don't attempt to virtualize them. But if you've got something new that you want to do, and a lot of our customers are standing up voice over LTE for the first time, for example, that's a new build out. You've got a simple choice. Am I going to buy a box to do that the old-fashioned way, which will become a boat anchor in 5 years' time? Or am I going to license a piece of software and deploy it on standard off-the-shelf hardware, in which case it'll live forever in my network, and I can change the hardware underneath it, and it'll carry on delivering better and better performance and becoming more and more efficient over time. It's a very simple and easy choice to make at that point. And I think if you overthink it, if you try and get too multidimensional about the whole problem, then you can talk yourself out of it sometimes.
Are we in danger of overthinking?
There's always that danger, I think, especially when you have so much concentration of IQ. But I think the new dimension that's getting exposed here is this notion of service agility, right? Without virtualizing the infrastructure, without virtualizing the network functions themselves, you're not going to be able to get to a level of service agility that's needed to react to the pressures in the market, right? So to me, that's the unexplored dimension, just to stick to the analogy that you're throwing at us, right? So, and then we're just in the beginning of realizing the benefit of that. So we just recently had one of the tier 1 service providers do a 5-year TCO ROI study, and the results are stunning in that you're talking about a 50% reduction in CapEx and OpEx, and probably the biggest impact is in terms of the pace at which you can roll out newer services and capabilities to your customers. So to me, that's the new dimension of ROI.
You're nodding away there,
Well, yes. Virtualization does open up a number of interesting possibilities. In our world, which is voice and IMS, the possibility of standing up a specialized IMS for a specialized purpose is so much. You can't conceive of doing that with a physical IMS. It's way too expensive and difficult and time-consuming. So you want to bring voice to a connected car situation. You want to stand up a special IMS for an enterprise customer. These are things that you can do in a matter of hours in a virtualized environment that would take you years if you were trying to build these things physically.
Now, still with physics, moving on to astrophysics. Black holes, terrible source of danger. All matter and information disappears without trace. In CSPs, in their transformation journeys, what are the black holes that CSPs need to avoid?
I think from a NFV journey perspective, while flexibility across all layers, right? So from hardware to the NFVI layer to the VNF to Mano layer, right? Going by the classical ETSI architecture is sort of the holy grail. Trying to have M times N right at the word get-go is a little bit of a tall order, or the equivalent of a black hole, in that you could end up spending too much energy chasing what will eventually become a reality. What I would posit is a much more pragmatic approach, and based on what we have seen results of customer success is at least bound a couple of these elements, right? So especially towards the bottom end of the spectrum, pick a few key use cases that you want to go and virtualize, and then demonstrate that you're ready to get the benefits from it, and then try to add more and more workloads to it rather than whiz bang, let's go, maybe go the big bang approach, if you will. So, so that's kind of my view.
Totally
Do you agree?
Absolutely. To take it evolutionarily, if that's a word. Start with an easy use case. Be prepared to learn from it. Don't attempt to plan your way all the way to the end game, because you'll get it wrong. And it's a classic telco mistake, because that's how they've always built services, right? They have to think it right through to the very end. With virtualization, that's a recipe for standing still and getting nothing done.
Which leads on to our next analogy, which is going back to CERN. You've got the acceleration, the high-speed acceleration of protons going around. With CSPs, they obviously want to accelerate and move their transformation, but not too fast, not too recklessly. They've got to take things carefully, would you say?
So I think we touched upon some of the elements already, right? So first is being careful about not taking on a scope that's too broad and ambitious and so well-defined. And from a results perspective, realize that it's going to be a little bit of cost saving, a little bit of agility of services that you're going to get, and not just taking cost away, because oftentimes if you're just going for cost reduction, then you're going to be maybe a little bit disappointed because some of the longer term benefits of service agility hasn't still kicked in. So as long as you have these pragmatic starting points and then pick the right vendors who are partnering with you for the longer term journey. You're not making a snapshot under the nose decision right now. You want vendors who can drive the agenda of technology with you and align in terms of philosophy. From our perspective, as Red Hat being the truly open source company, we definitely want to partner with organizations that believe in open source and want to push the envelope of open source. And I'm sure Martin will have similar characteristics in terms of alignment with customers. So if these things fall in place, I think the journey becomes a rewarding journey rather than one where we're worried about black holes or distractions, etc.
Yeah, and really just reiterate: learn by doing. Don't approach it too theoretically, because as I say, that way you're going to overanalyze. You're going to find all sorts of problems and all sorts of issues, which actually in reality turn out not to be real.
And what I'm picking up from both of you during this discussion is partners and the importance of the right partners and working together. And the two of you, I believe, are partners as well.
Sure. I mean, telcos are so used to the one throat to choke thing. Single vendor. They'll look after me. I won't have to worry about bringing these things together. And of course, those vendors naturally sow the seeds of doubt about how hard it is to plug these things together, as that's what you'd expect them to do. But the reality is that the various members of the ecosystem, guys like Red Hat who are providing the software infrastructure, guys like HP who are providing the hardware piece of it, and maybe some of the software stack, the OSS, and orchestration, and then specialists like us, who really know our onions in the VNF space. We all work together very well, and we do a lot of proving out and ironing out the issues amongst ourselves, if you like, in the lab. So when we come into the service provider's lab, we hit the ground running, and I think many people we've dealt with have been astonished by how easy it is and how these problems turn out to be completely illusory.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? So first of all, from an open source perspective, forums such as OPNFV bring together vendors from different backgrounds and different points of view to help listen to what the needs in the market are and then identify priority areas to focus on. So that, definitely removes some of the angst that Martin talks about, right? Why walk in with the fear of the unknown, but rather have the confidence that, hey, we all can get together and find, carve out solutions that make sense for everyone. The second aspect also is beyond the innovation part, being able to partner from an execution level to be able to deliver solutions together. And so that's why we pride ourselves in being able to stitch together these rich partnerships, such as with Metaswitch, such as with HP, such as with every NEP out there, so that we are offering choice to customers, and at the same time, if they're picking a combination, they have the peace of mind that this is not the first time the combination is being tested in their environment, but rather it's been proven already in the labs, etc., and the two vendors or multiple vendors are together committing for the longer term to make sure that the customer is successful here, right? So So that's kind of my view. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely,
Martin?
yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I think we've stretched the physics analogies as far as we can go, but it does seem that for one last time, we're certainly closer to finding this elusive transformation particle, which will make service providers' lives a heck of a lot easier. But underlining all this, of course, is very serious, and this transformation is serious for service providers, and the role of NFV is a very important one. But for now, Radesh and Martin, thank you both very much indeed for joining us on TelecomTV.
Thank you.
Pleasure.